When I was young, about 8 years old, I made friends with a dogman I encountered on my family's farm. I don't care if you want to laugh or call me crazy. I love telling this story because I love that creature. And telling this story always brings me joy. This is a story of a little boy and his once-in-a-lifetime friend. It was January in southwest Ohio. I was 8 years old and just woke up to the roosters crowing. I looked out my window and it had snowed a lot last night. I made my way downstairs where Mama had breakfast ready and I sat down with Pops to eat. Pops looked over and said thermometer shows 3 degrees and with that wind it's well in the negatives. Make sure you dress for it when you go out to do your chores. I nodded, not looking forward to my chores for the day, as it had been unusually cold the last couple days. I finished eating, got my boots and coat, coveralls, hat, gloves, and all that on and headed outside. I had 3 things to do this morning: collect the chicken eggs, break the ice on the water tub for the cows, and clean out the 2 horse stalls in the barn. Now, little did I know, this day of chores was going to change my life forever. I broke the ice for the cows as fast as I could, then ran to the barn since it was out of the wind. After scooping the stalls, I needed a little more straw. The straw was up in the loft and I had to climb the ladder to get up there. Once I got to the top, I looked around for a second and smelled what I thought was wet dog. There isn't supposed to be any animals up here. Maybe the horse stall smell is just accumulating up here. I climbed on up and started shuffling around. It was hard to see, so I just started shuffling straw with my feet towards the edge. Then I tripped over something. I landed on my hands and knees pretty hard. Before I could collect myself, I heard a bunch of straw fall into the floor. As I turned, I was met with powerful, yet beautiful yellow eyes. I was terrified at first. Then after just a moment, it slowly backed away and I could hear it lay down again. I slowly picked myself up. I thought about running down the ladder as fast as I could, but I really wanted to know what this was. And it didn't hurt me. I shuffled over towards the loft window, unlatched it, and slowly opened the door. Light began to fill the hayloft left to right. Then almost in the center, I saw a big mound of fur. I slowly took a couple steps, closer and closer. I could make out large pointed ears, and a snout. It was a dog, or a wolf, but it was huge. I didn't even know dogs or wolves could get that big. After taking a couple more steps, it rose its head and again looked at me with its powerful, beautiful yellow eyes. I noticed its right front leg had a wound with dried blood around it. Then it let out a low growl. All I could muster was, sorry. I closed the window and went right back down the ladder. At first I wanted to run straight to the house and tell my pops, but he wouldn't take kindly to an unwanted animal in the barn with our horses. And well, I've always wanted a dog. Then I got an idea. I ran straight to the chicken coop and collected 8 to 10 eggs. Surely he'll like eggs, right? He has to be hungry. I ran back to the barn, put the handle of the egg basket in my mouth, and climbed up the ladder. Hey guys, if you're a fan of how we tell cryptid stories and true scary stories in an immersive format, please drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and tell me in the comments what you guys thought of the story. I'd love to talk with you guys. Those actions help a small channel like Dark Secrets so much, and we deeply appreciate it. Now let's get back to that story. After getting to the top of the ladder, I went over and opened the window. When the light touched him, he looked up at me again, then to the basket, then back at me. And a little bit of hay started shifting behind him. Was he wagging his tail? It was then I also noticed he had beautiful brownish gold fur. I took a couple steps forward and dumped the eggs out on the floor. He stood up on all 4s with noticeable pain in that right front leg. He towered over me. He could have rested his head on mine. He limped over to the eggs and gave them a sniff, then one by one ate every single one of them. Overjoyed, I decided to push my luck and slowly reached my hand out. The big dog looked at my hand and then locked eyes with me. It had such an intelligent, deliberate, and intuitive look to its eyes, like no animal I've ever saw. He then lowered his head and let me pet him for a moment, and then obviously, still in pain, he laid back in the hay and closed his eyes. I shut the loft window and went down the ladder and ran back inside. My mom hollered when I got in, "Bring me the eggs, dear." I walked into the kitchen with an empty basket. "Did you not collect the eggs?" Mother asked. "I did," I replied. "There wasn't any eggs today." I heard Pops grumble under his breath. "It's been so damn cold the chickens won't even lay eggs." I then ran up to my room. I needed to process all of this. Sitting on my bed, all I could think about was my new friend. And what if my Pops found him? What would he do? What would my dog do if he felt threatened? And the wound. How did he get that wound? Will he be okay? After a long while of just reminiscing about what just happened, I decided I needed to take care of it. It was hurt and very cold, so I needed to feed it and keep him a secret from Pops. For the next several weeks, my parents had no idea what to make of me. They had no idea why I was so excited and eager to do my chores every morning. I would sneak parts of my breakfast and a few eggs from the hen house to him every morning, and some of my supper at night too if I could manage it with a good excuse. His wound healed up nicely, and with its healing, he started being somewhat playful towards me. Now, every time I came up the ladder, he was waiting at the top, ready to play or rub his head against me. And even though he was so freakishly huge, I'll never forget how gentle he was with me. One day I was in the loft, and Pops came into the barn and yelled for me. Chip, which is the name I had now given my new friend, stood up attentively. I said under my breath, "No." Chip looked at me and I just nodded my head and pointed towards the hay. And then Chip just turned and went and bedded down in the hay. Could he understand me? How smart is he? I yelled out, "I'm up here, Pops, getting some hay." He replied, "Your mother needs your help for a bit." "All right." I'm headed back inside. I remember as it began to warm up, it was hit and miss when I would see Chip in the hayloft, which saddened me because it started feeling like once it was warmer, he'd be gone for good. In April, I went 2 weeks straight without seeing him. Then, on a sunny afternoon, I seen something in the wood line. It was Chip. I ran across the field yelling, "Chip, that you?" I got to the tree line and went inside. "Chip, you there, boy?" Then from behind a tree emerged a huge dog. But this wasn't Chip. This one was almost pure black. The eyes were more of a red color than Chip's yellow eyes, and it started walking towards me, what seemed like menacingly. Then from the right emerged a creature that was probably 8 or 9 feet tall. It looked like a wolf, but it was standing on its back 2 legs. It jumped between me and the black wolf and snarled a hideous, deep growl. The black wolf stopped almost immediately and cocked its head with curiosity. The one standing on 2 legs in front of me turned and looked at me, and I saw those powerful, beautiful yellow eyes. "Chip?" I responded. He went down to all 4s and started wagging his tail. It was Chip. Then the other one he protected me from slowly approached. It gave me a light sniff and just cocked its head towards Chip. Chip rubbed his head against mine as the black dog, or now I'm thinking werewolf, watched. Once done, the black one rubbed its head on mine as well, and the 2 just walked off together. I noticed as they were walking away that the black one was a girl. It was his girlfriend. That's why I haven't seen him. Does this mean I'm gonna get puppies? My excitement left me pretty quickly though as I remembered the whole incident. I recalled seeing Chip standing on 2 legs. He was muscular and looked like an unstoppable force. This wasn't a dog. What was it? I decided to tell Pops that evening about Chip. He listened surprisingly better than I anticipated. And when I got done telling him everything I had experienced, he sat for a moment in deep thought. After what felt like ages, he responded, "I always wondered if they were friendly or not." He chuckled. "I guess with a little food you can befriend anything." I was stunned. I asked him, "Have you seen him?" And Pops responded, "Your grandpops talked about having a dogman in the area when he had the farm. I've seen the one you call Chip 2 or 3 times, and that black one once. I didn't say anything to you and your mom, because I didn't want to scare you. I never have saw him on 2 legs, however." I was thrilled he believed me, until he crushed me completely with his next few words. "At any moment, that thing could kill you. It is a wild animal. Maybe it'll feel threatened, or hell, maybe it just gets real hungry. I don't want you going near them anymore." His voice was firm and strong. I couldn't argue. I just started crying and ran to my room. I laid in bed all night, so angry. There's no way I'm giving up Chip. In fact, I'm gonna go see him tomorrow. The next day, I went out and looked all over the woods for Chip, but never saw him. I looked for him when I could for the next several weeks with no luck. My dad noticed what I was doing, and he asked me one day, "Any luck, son?" "With what?" I replied, playing dumb. "I know you've been looking for Chip." I hung my head low. "He's gone. I haven't seen him since I told you about him." I had tears filling my eyes. Pops looked at me and said, "It's that time of year. He and his girlfriend probably went to find a den and start their own family." I was saddened by his words, but at the same time I was happy for Chip. I walked back inside the house and got ready for bed. I had my window open, and just before I drifted off, I heard a distant, powerful howl. I smiled to myself. Good luck with your new family, boy. I'll miss you. His family always chalked his tales up to just an old man's story. Until one Thanksgiving he told a story and one of his grandsons noticed something that nobody ever noticed before, and it made him a believer. It also sent chills down his spine as he thought, maybe Grandpa's story is true. Everyone in our family knows our grandpa's wendigo story. He's told it to me since I was a little kid. As a kid, I loved the story. Then as a teen, I didn't believe it was real and that it was just Grandpa telling stories. But now that I'm an adult, I'm not so sure again if this story doesn't have some merit. Last week at Thanksgiving, Grandpa started telling his story again. This time was different, however. I noticed things I've never thought to look for before. His eyes were serious. His face went pale when he got to the quote-unquote good parts, and I saw goosebumps come and go on his arms through the entire story. He definitely saw something, and it changed the rest of his life. And here is his story. When I was 19, I worked cattle on a large piece of land near the Crow Indian Reservation over by Yellowstone. I worked with an older, rough-looking man that was tough as nails with a pull-yourself-up-by-the-boots attitude, because nobody's coming to save you. I was his third hand in the last 6 months. I asked the old man why he was going through hands so fast. I could see the hesitation on his face before he said, "You ain't got the guts to know the truth." Thinking back now, that old man knew exactly what he was doing. Telling a 19-year-old kid with something to prove that he doesn't have what it takes is exactly how you motivate them to stick around to prove you wrong. I answered him, "Yes, I do. I'm tougher than any of your previous hands." "Is that so?" the old man responded. "Well, then grab a seat, and I'll tell you what's been going on. But don't you go yellow on me and scamper off with your tail between your legs, you hear?" We sat next to the fire, and the old man began telling me how his first hand disappeared one night, left his horse and all of his belongings. The old man looked for him for 2 days, chalked it up to he just must have scampered straight off. And the second man came back into camp one night ghost white, shaking in his boots, packed up his stuff on the horse, and left without ever saying a word, and never returned. "I reckon it's that damn wendigo," said the old man. Hesitantly, I replied, "What's a wendigo?" The old man's face went cold. He said, "This may sound crazy, but you'll be doing yourself a damn good favor to take everything I'm about to say seriously. You understand, boy?" I nodded with what I'm sure was a terrified look on my face. I spoke with one of the medicine men over on the reservation. They call them wendigos. They're said to be old Indian medicine men who made deals with evil spirits to obtain the ability to shapeshift, among other things. These medicine men then became a hideous creature. Accounts range from 8 to 15 foot tall, glowing coal red eyes, a long tongue, and they resemble a deer or an elk with antlers. The limbs are all oddly shaped, and it can walk on 2 legs. They say you'll often smell rotten flesh if one is near, because its own body is in a perpetual state of decomposition as one of the punishments for practicing dark magic. I was stunned. He was serious. All I could get out was, have you ever seen one? He nodded slowly. I had one terrorize me and the cattle a while back. That medicine man helped me deal with it, or so I thought. But that's all he would say. He refused to revisit the story. I was visibly shaken, but at the same time held some disbelief. Giant, evil, rotting deer walking on 2 legs? There has to be an explanation. But those feelings of doubt, they left me on the 3rd night out with the cattle. We covered a huge area of land, and often at night, to keep a better watch, the old man and I set up 2 separate camps on opposite ends of the herd, which was the case this night. It was just after dark. The cows were starting to quiet down, and I had just finished supper when I noticed all the cows almost simultaneously went quiet. They all started shifting, getting up and moving nervously away from the wood line. I stood up and grabbed my pistol. It was likely either cow thieves or a critter looking to snatch a calf. I walked over to where the cows were before they started moving off and looked into the woods the best I could. I had half a moon, but it was pitch dark once you tried to look inside the wood line. Then the smell hit me. Putrid, rotting flesh. At first I thought to myself, I'm gonna have to come back to the woods in the morning and make sure it's not one of my cattle. Then I remembered the old man's story, and a chill ran down my spine. I turned to head back to camp and heard a single loud branch snap. I whipped around and was met with glowing, coal red eyes looking at me from the timber. Real quick, if you're a fan of how we tell cryptid stories and true scary stories in an immersive format, well, that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So please drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn notifications on so you don't miss the next one. All these steps help a small channel like Dark Secrets so much, and we deeply appreciate it. Now let's get back to that story. Those red eyes were like burning coals. I remember gripping my pistol so tight my hand was shaking, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, I was so scared. The eyes began to move and get larger. Was it coming towards me? Indeed it was. As it slowly emerged from the tree line into the dim half-moon's light, I saw it. A deformed, hideous creature, resembling a deer, standing on 2 legs. Its front legs, or arms, I don't know what to call them, had huge, nasty claws. It started moving slowly towards me. 1 step, then 2, and 3. It disturbed me how unnatural this thing's movements were. Then those steps got faster. 4, 5, 6, 7. That's when I snapped out of it and raised my pistol. I fired 5 of my 6 shots. I watched dust and flesh come off this thing as each bullet hit, but it never reacted. Like I did nothing at all. And now it was at a full run, with the most horrifying movement. I steadied my aim and fired my last bullet and hit it square in the head. It staggered to a stop and just started shaking its head like it was annoyed. I used that moment to run back to camp. I stumbled into camp and went straight to my saddlebag for more ammo. I could see the glowing red eyes slowly making their way towards me. I dropped 3 or 4 rounds before I could get all 6 rounds loaded back into my pistol. After I got the last round in, I looked up, but I couldn't see it. My mind began to race. That was a wendigo, or a windigo. I don't remember how to say it now. I shot it 6 times, once in the head, and it didn't care. About that time, I heard hooves coming fast. The old man heard my gunshots and rode over from his camp. "What's wrong? What happened?" The old man, seeing my face, was ghost white, My knuckles were still white too from gripping my pistol so hard. He looked at me again with a softer voice and said, "Son, you're safe. What did you see?" When I began to speak, my throat was tight. It was difficult to explain what happened, as if explaining it was just confirming it to myself that it was real. After telling him the story, the old man said he would stay the rest of the night with me, and the next morning we were going to head to the medicine man. In all my years of life, I never remember being more happy to see the sun than that next morning. We ate breakfast, saddled our horses, and headed off to see this Indian man the old man's been talking about. Once we arrived, the old man talked to a few people of the tribe before motioning me over to a tent. Inside was feathers and odd shapes made out of sticks, drawings, and all kinds of herbs and plants. The old man was straight to the point. "My hand here had a close call with a wendigo last night." The medicine man looked at me and said, "Tell me." After telling him my story, he sat for a moment in thought before saying, "You have definitely been chosen by the wendigo, and it will not stop coming for you." I was stunned, but before I could protest, he pulled out a small pouch that was tied shut. As he handed it to me, he said, "When the wendigo returns, throw this pouch in its direction. Make sure it sees the pouch so it can take it. It will appease the beast. But you must promise me one thing, that you will not open the pouch." "But why can't I?" And the medicine man cut me off. "You must not open the pouch." I nodded, took the pouch. The old man exchanged a few items with the medicine man, I'm assuming as payment for his help, and we set back towards camp. All the way back to camp, I was holding that pouch and I wanted to look inside so bad. I could feel inside was something soft, some material that felt like plants maybe, and something else that was somewhat hard and flexible. The only thing that kept me from opening that pouch was the thought of what if it ruins it by opening it and it don't work anymore. The old man set up camp with me for 3 nights in a row, and we had 3 uneventful nights. The 4th night, the old man said we should split up again. I was terrified, but I wasn't going to let him know that. I still had something to prove. I was just about to drift off when I heard it again. All the cows went quiet and started nervously moving further away from me. I shot up, eyes intently looking for those red eyes. I had my pistol gripped in my left hand and the medicine man's bag in the right. The smell hit me first, that putrid, rotten flesh smell again. My hand tightened on the pouch. I heard movement behind me. I whipped around to see those glowing red eyes moving quickly towards me, unnaturally quick. They caught me off guard again. I was stunned for a moment, not moving while it got closer and closer. I came to my senses and threw the pouch directly at the creature, nearly hitting it. It slowed to a stop and slowly turned its head and looked at the pouch. A moment of fear washed over me. Was this pouch useless, and did I just piss this thing off even more? I watched it take 3 or 4 hideous-looking steps over to the pouch. It picked it up with its hand or claw or whatever that thing was and sniffed it. Then it turned and just walked away. I stayed with the old man the rest of the season and never saw or smelt that wendigo again. But I barely slept each night, terrified if I went to sleep, I would wake up with it standing over me. On our last day, the old man said, "Well, you proved me wrong. You toughed it out. Maybe I'll see you back next season." I replied full of pride, "Yep, it's going to take more than a little old wendigo to scare me off." Then I left and never went back. I'm going to tell you this story as if I was the one that reported it, and I'm going to do it in the Dark Secrets fashion, immersive storytelling. Here we go. On a Wednesday afternoon in August, I was packing up to go on a 3-day camping trip at Reflection Lake in Washington State. Stephen Canyon's road, which leads up to Reflection Lake, usually closes during the winter, so I was trying to get one last trip up there before the cold season started. I arrived at Reflection Lake about an hour before dark, and the lake was just as beautiful as I remember it every time I go. The water was glass smooth, with ducks and geese dotting the surface. It was about a 45-minute hike up to the secluded spot that I go to every time I come up here. The hike was pretty uneventful, but beautiful. Birds were singing, sun was out, light breeze, perfect hike. I arrived at my spot with just enough time left to get me a fire set up. I'm definitely getting older. Packing all this stuff 45 minutes took me a little longer than last year, I'll have to admit. I took a seat next to the fire and watched the last few rays of sunlight disappear behind the mountaintops, and I started making my dinner. About 30 minutes after dark, I was finishing up supper. The fire was starting to dwindle, only putting off a small ring of light. Beyond that, pitch darkness. And that's when I heard a thud right outside my fire's ring of light. I looked in the direction of the noise, just in time to see a medium-sized rock roll into the light of the fire. My initial reaction was anger. I was thinking to myself, I come out here one last time, for one last peace of mind, and even clear out here, I still have hoodlums screwing with me. I shouted out into the darkness, "Knock it off! Leave me be!" But there was no response, and then I heard another thud. I looked over and saw another rock roll into the light of my fire. Now the second rock definitely made me uneasy. I yelled out into the darkness one more time. I said, "Knock it off! I'm gonna call the park ranger." But again, no response. And that's when I smelled it. It was a strong, pungent odor, like a mixture between skunk and wet dog. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I thought, maybe this is not hoodlums. I decided to take refuge in my tent. It was just thin material held up by flimsy poles. It offered no real protection, I knew that. But it made me feel safer being inside and the door zipped shut. I can remember from inside my tent, there was a little bit of light on the side of the tent facing the fire. I could see the glow of the fire through the tent. And that glow went dark and then lit up again. Did something just walk between my tent and the fire? The smell now was tremendously strong. Whatever I had smelled earlier is definitely right outside my tent. I laid awake for hours, listening intently, too scared to move. I never heard or saw anything else that night. The smell stayed in my tent for a couple hours, but as the smell left, I felt more and more at ease and finally drifted off. The soft rays of the morning light is finally what woke me up. I lay in bed for a while, just confused. Did last night really happen? Or was it just a dream? Obviously, the best way to tell if it was a dream or not would be to take a look around camp. So I slowly unzipped my tent, peeked my head out. Real quick before we continue, if you guys are enjoying how we tell stories like this in an immersive style, please hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. It helps a brand new channel like Dark Secrets so much, and I deeply appreciate it. And can someone please do me a favor? Can you go down in the comments and tell our editor, Jen Yuva, what an awesome job she does through audio and visuals to immerse you in the story? I would appreciate that. Now let's get back to the story. As I unzipped the tent, I've got to admit, I was a little hesitant to put my head out. But once I finally got the courage to, I noticed that there really wasn't nothing strange about camp. I looked for tracks, but the ground was so hard packed, I don't think anything could have left a track, no matter how big it was. I did see one, what I thought was a print, but it looked fairly human and it was massive. And I just wrote it off because it made no sense to me and it was really hard to make out. It could have been anything. Then I walked over to my campfire and I froze for a second. Those two rocks I saw were very real because they were still sitting right where I had seen them last. I will admit this shook me up a little, but I chalked it up to a wild animal. I wasn't going to let something scare me out of my last camping trip of the year that easily. I grabbed my fishing rod and went out for a day of stream fishing. It was a pretty uneventful day fishing, but I had a creel full of trout and I was on my way back that evening. And as the sun set, I started getting uneasy again. Was this wild animal going to return? What was it? I tried to push it out of my mind. When I arrived back at camp, I still had about 30 minutes until dark, so I washed up a bit and started getting ready to cook my fish. The fire was crackling, my skillet was hot. I was just about to lay my first fish in the skillet when a familiar sound caught my attention. A thud in the darkness, and this time the stone that came rolling into camp was much bigger, big enough to seriously hurt someone. I didn't yell out this time. I just watched and listened intently. I was illuminated by my fire and couldn't see past its light, and whatever it was could see me clear as day. I felt powerless and at this thing's will. Then I froze in fear. I smelled that skunky, wet dog smell again. Then in the darkness, I could make out what appeared to be two red eyes looking right at me. I dove for my flashlight and shined it in the direction of the eyes. I only caught a glimpse of something huge moving deeper into the trees. At first I thought it was a bear, but it was walking on two legs. It was covered in fur and must have been 7 to 8 feet tall. Every fiber of my being wanted to be safe at home. Every muscle ached with adrenaline wanting to run. I was helpless. I was in the middle of nowhere, alone, with no gun, and 45 minutes from my truck. As dumb as it sounds now, I leaped in my tent and zipped the door shut again, as I did the night before. What else could I do? As I was trying to collect myself, I heard a heavy breath right outside my tent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end with anxiety and fear. I watched the side of the tent slightly bulge in, as if something was pushing on it, then backed off. Then I felt something touch me from behind. Absolutely frozen in paralyzing fear. I definitely felt it touch me as it pressed on the tent behind me. Then it backed off again. I sat silently while it went through my camp. I could hear it rummaging through things, off and on all night. I stopped hearing noises about 30 minutes before daybreak, but I did not dare go to sleep. When my tent was well lit by the morning sun, I nervously unzipped the tent and peeked outside. From the tent, I could already see my skillet was bent in half. All my things in my pack were scattered across camp, and the fish I never got the chance to cook, they were gone completely. I quickly gathered a few of my more valuable things and immediately started heading back to the truck. I even left my tent. I just wanted out of there. All the way back to the truck, I kept checking behind me, but never saw a thing. I'll never forget how good it felt to be back in my vehicle and feel a sense of safety. That was 4 years ago now. I've not went camping anywhere since that trip. I haven't had the courage to tell anyone this story out loud. Doing it anonymously on the internet is allowing me to get it off my chest and not be judged by friends and family. But then I saw it, gleaming yellow eyes cutting through the darkness. Whatever this thing was, it followed me. My name is Andrew, and today I'm going to be telling you an intense story reported by a guy here in the US. I'm going to be telling you this story as if I was the one that reported it. Now, without further ado, let's get into the story. Under the silver gleam of a full moon, I decided to go on a nighttime hike. There was a local area of the woods that had really well-marked trails that was perfect for nighttime hiking. It seemed the trees were whispering in the wind that night. And I don't know if it was the full moon or what it was, but the forest just seemed alive this night. I remember the air being cool and the trail lit so well that night with patches of light and dark made by the trees. I needed this alone time. It had been one hell of a rough week. I was probably about 30 minutes in my hike and the air just shifted. An eerie silence fell over the forest. All the animals went quiet. My heart pounded in my chest as I could feel the presence of something in the shadows. All of my senses were screaming danger, but yet curiosity kept me rooted. Then I heard a rustling sound to my left. A low growl sent shivers down my spine, but I could see nothing. I turned and I started walking briskly back down the path, and then I heard another growl in front of me. Is this the same creature? How did it get in front of me? Silently. I shined my light in the direction of the noise, but again, nothing. And then I heard it, a stick snap about 40 feet behind me. How did it get behind me? How did it do it so quietly again? Is this thing toying with me? I'm now completely freaked out, and I start sprinting down the trail, periodically looking behind me with the flashlight. I saw nothing. After running for a few minutes in my pure panic, I fell. I got up and started to collect myself, and then just intently listened. But then I saw it, gleaming yellow eyes cutting through the darkness. Whatever this thing was, it followed me, and with ease. I was on open trail. This thing had to have moved through the underbrush, and silently? Is this thing hunting me? What does it want? What is it? All these things were racing through my mind. Absolutely terrified in fear, I watched a massive figure emerge from the shadows. Before this gets too juicy, if you're enjoying this type of storytelling, please drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't be a stranger in the comments. Let me know what you think of the video, if you think this story is real, and anything you think I can improve on. That way my next video can be that much better for you guys. Now let's get back to the story. As it emerged out of the darkness and was bathed in moonlight, it was a wolf. But not just any wolf, it was a massive wolf. On all fours, its head was level with me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Its eyes were powerful, glowing a deep yellow, and something struck me odd about the limbs. It was on all fours and it looked like a wolf, but the limbs just weren't quite right, and I couldn't tell what it was until, to my horror, it stood up on its back legs. This thing was massive. It had to have been 7 to 8 feet tall. It had a wolf-like snout, but the eyes were so intelligent looking and intense. There was nothing animalistic about the eyes. It gave me shivers just thinking about it. The muscles on this thing, the chest, the legs, the arms, was more muscular than any human I've ever seen. It screamed power. I don't think even if I had a gun it would have done a thing to this. I remember getting a good look at its fur. It was dark, deep, rusty red, and it was all matted. It had a really musty smell to it, too. And then we locked eyes. Its gaze pierced into my very soul. An inexplicable connection formed. And at that moment I realized it was studying me just as much as I was studying it. I was still paralyzed in absolute fear. But now I couldn't put my finger on if it truly wanted to hurt me or if it was just curious. Suddenly, out of nowhere, it let out a deep, bone-chilling howl. It rattled my chest and shook my bones. I remember falling to the ground and just putting my hands up in complete submission. I then heard the creature make a grunt, almost like a grunt of satisfaction. And as I slowly looked up, it was gone. It was gone again just as fast and just as silently as it appeared a minute ago. I began sprinting back to the car. I was filled with anxiety and fear. Every step felt way too slow. The thought that this thing could catch me at any moment if it wanted to was overwhelming me. I finally reached the car, and it probably only took a couple seconds, but it felt like minutes as I fumbled with my keys to get the door unlocked. I got inside and slammed the door. I breathed a slight breath of relief, put the key in the ignition, and started the car. Right as I was putting it in drive, I saw it one last time. The big, yellow, powerful eyes looking at me through the darkness, almost like it just wanted to remind me I could have had you if I wanted you. I had yet to go on another hike, daytime or nighttime. The fear that I felt was so primal. And I don't know what's more stressful. The fact that I had this encounter, or the fact that all of my friends and family look at me like, "Are you okay?" when I try to tell them this story. It's so frustrating to be this traumatized and everybody think you're just crazy. You can call me skeptical with an open mind. I have a really hard time believing a lot of these stories, but at the same time, there are so many accounts from around the entire world of similar nature, similar descriptions, similar interactions. I also can't deny that it's completely not true. As always, keep an open mind. I'll see you in the next one.